What's going on, everybody? This is Robby. I know it's been a while, but I'm back for a little bit, at least for the summer. So I thought it'd be good to do a little more in-depth video on sort of the theory behind flat hopping. This is by no means a replacement for our other video which we shot. You can find that by clicking somewhere around here. You'll figure it out. They'll edit it in or something. I don't know. But this is going to be just a little more in-depth when it comes to actually fitting your barrel window. I noticed that the last video we sort of breezed over it a little bit as far as like cutting the actual window size to the nubs. This is just going to dive a little more into that. But make sure you check out the other video. It has a lot of good information as far as like the lead up to this. With this, I'm assuming that your nub and your bucking are already modified, but I am going to go in and show you how to sort of cut your nub and fit the nub to the window a little better. Okay, so as a little recap from the last video, the goal of flat hopping is to increase the surface area between the bucking and the BB as the BB travels through. With a standard cylindrical nub, it works fine, and the main reason that manufacturers do that from the factory as opposed to doing something like flat hop is because it's simple and it works. But you'll notice some serious accuracy and range increases from doing this flat hop mop properly, assuming you do it properly. So that's sort of what I'm going to talk about and make sure you guys are getting good results with it. Okay, so real quick, in the last video, just to save some time, we did this on an Orga barrel, which allowed us to not modify the bucking because the Orga barrel actually has cutouts that you can just twist the bucking 90 degrees and slot it on without modifying it. Today, I'm using a Mad Bull barrel, and I'm using a standard Prometheus bucking, so in this case, we are going to have to modify this guy to get it to fit properly. So what that means is that we're going to have to turn this bucking inside out, and for a lot of harder buckings, this is kind of the most difficult part of the procedure because you have to be careful. You don't want to use anything sharp or anything that's going to puncture or damage the bucking whenever you turn it inside out. But you just want to get something over the front lips and sort of fold it in on itself and then peel everything back, and you'll eventually end up with the bucking completely inside out, and you'll be able to see both the channel lock that locks on the bottom of the barrel and the mound that acts as sort of your secondary nub for a standard nub. And we're going to shave both of those off. As far as what to use, for this I've used a razor blade, and if you're good enough, a razor blade does just fine. However, if you do go the razor blade route, you have to be really careful, especially if it's new and sharp, that you don't cut any more that's needed. This especially is important when you get back toward the skirt of the bucking when you're shaving off the channel. You don't want to go too far and cut into the skirt because that's going to damage your longevity and eventually your skirt's going to fail. So what I usually recommend for people, if you have access to a Dremel tool, preferably you want to use a Dremel tool with one of the fine grindstone bits, as fine as you can get, and that way you have a little more control, especially with some of the harder areas like on the mound where the surface is curved. Gives you a little more control as far as like shaving that off a little more precisely and not having to worry about digging into the actual bucking itself where you're not supposed to. I say use a fine bit because if you go too coarse, if you use something that's like on a belt sander or anything that's abrasive like that, that moves really fast, you're going to have issues where you're going to end up tearing the bucking just because it's a little bit too aggressive on the material itself. So just something to be careful with. So what I've done here, I've actually installed the barrel with no bucking on it, and what that allows me to do is look in through the top of the hop-up window. What you want to do. I'm using a stock VFC hop-up unit. Doesn't really matter. The theory is the same, but it will vary depending on the hop-up unit you choose. But this will allow you to sort of see how your barrel window aligns with your hop-up window on your actual hop-up unit. Another thing you're going to want to do is take your hop-up arm and, if possible, install it somewhere on the outside or just sort of line it up and see where the bridge that contacts the nub sits in relation to the window on the actual barrel itself. If you cut your nub to just the window size on either the hop-up or the barrel and you don't sort of account for how they align with the arm, you're going to have issues where the nub will sort of grab material where it's not supposed to, and it'll sort of get hung up on the sides of the barrel window, which can do you no good. In fact, that'll usually cause more problems than actually getting the results that you should when it comes to flat hopping everything. So as a point of reference, I've already had the nub cut to the size of the window, so I've already lined it up and seen how everything lines up. But you want a little bit of free play. You want about 1 millimeter at least of material on each side of the nub itself for the bucking to wrap around. You don't want this to be a snug fit in your barrel window. That's going to cause problems, like I said before, with it getting hung up on the edges of the barrel window and not giving you that nice flat surface like you should. So on the topic of the actual barrel window itself, this VFC unit is really nice because everything lines up pretty straight. The way that the arm drops into the window, both windows relative to where they're at, is pretty centered. You'll notice that on some hop-up units, such as I've noticed this a lot on like V3s, like stuff that's in AKs and AUGs and stuff. You'll notice that sometimes the window or the nub in relation to the window will want to be front biased based on where the arm sits. So you'll notice that the front of the arm will actually sit more toward the front of the window than the back of the window. And that's something you're going to have to sort of account for when you cut your nub in order to fill out the window properly. Okay, so now we're just going to go ahead and sort of reassemble everything. So I'm going to once again check, just sort of eyeball it here and make sure. I'm going to put my nub in my barrel window and just make sure it's moving freely, which it is. I have enough material on either side for the bucking material to sort of wrap around and get into the barrel window, so that's good. So next, this is important if you're not using an Orga because you don't have those channels. Whenever you shave everything out, you're going to need to turn the bucking 90 degrees. And the reason you do that is so you get like a nice smooth surface instead of using one of the surfaces that you've already tarnished by cutting. So you don't want it to contact the mound that you shaved off where it normally would contact. You don't want it to contact the ridge you shaved off that helps the barrel align. So we're going to turn this 90 degrees. It helps if you get the old channel as like a point of reference and just slide it on just so it's out of the way of the barrel window. For polymer units such as this, sometimes it can be a little tight. You will have issues where it'll snug up real good. You don't want it to seize up in there because that'll make it even harder to take out when you have to. The other reason you don't want it to snug up is because if the material catches wrong whenever you're putting it in, it can actually warp the skirt of the bucking when you go to turn it, which is bad. You don't want that to turn into an oval, and you don't want the lips to get all warped out. You want it to get a good air seal with your nozzle, regardless of what kind of system you have. As I drop it off. For right now, I'm using Tech T gun salve. You can pretty much use anything that's petroleum less, I guess, without petroleum fillers. So you want to use something that's like a paintball grease. We also use super lube for these kind of jobs. Also, if you just have regular silicone oil, like the thin silicone oil, that's fine too. But you don't need a lot. You don't need to be too liberal with it. And no matter what, whenever you lubricate the outside of this bucking, you don't want to get any of that lubrication on the skirt or inside the bucking. Because what's that going to do is when your BBs pass through, it's not going to get enough friction on the bucking, and you're going to get weird inconsistencies when it comes to shooting. So that's very important. Some people even go to the length to actually modify the inside material of their bucking to add more of a friction coefficient. So they'll actually take and sand it over to give it a little more roughness when it comes to catching the BB. So we're not going to do that today. We're just going to leave it normally lubricated without touching the inside of the bucking. Okay, so actually what I've done, our bucking here has some miles on it. This is a shop bucking. This probably has like 30 or 40,000 shots through it. We're just kind of revamping one of the shop guns, which makes it really convenient for us to shoot a flat top video right now. So what I've actually done, because the bucking is older and it has some miles on it, it tends to want to stretch out when you put it in the hop-up unit, especially when you have a plastic unit like the VFC. So I've cut off about 1/8 of an inch off of the length of the bucking, and that just keeps it from stretching and obstructing the window that we need to put our C-clip in. So I'm just going to go ahead and slide this over here, once again using the old bridge. If I can find it here, I cut it pretty smooth. There we go. So there's our old bridge as a point of reference. So we're just going to go ahead, slide this over the barrel, and I'll slide this into the actual hop-up unit. It's okay to twist it a little bit. You just got to make sure that the bucking itself stays in line with the barrel. You don't want your barrel turning inside of the bucking itself, because then you have a chance of getting one of those obstructed areas that we talked about before. Okay, so next we're going to put our C-clip in. You'll hear it click. These VFC ones are nice because they're pretty impossible to misalign. They click in pretty sturdily. So we got all that clicked in. It's rock solid. And now it's important that you do that first, because if you try to wrestle this nub in here, like some people do, like where you flip the hop-up unit upside down and try to like push it in like while the hop's upside down, you're going to have a world of trouble when it comes to getting this stuff lined up. So it's way easier just to put the bucking and the barrel in first, then use the top window to drop everything in. And we went over this in the other video too, I realized. So it might be a little bit of double speak, but it's all right. So now I'm going to put the nub in here. I'm just going to use a little flathead to sort of push it down in here and seat it. The other option that people do is occasionally people will actually super glue their nub to the actual hop-up arm. This gives you a little bit of added stability. I personally don't do it because in the event that you want to swap out nubs or change nub setups, which I do to my guns a lot, it sort of gets in the way. But some people, it's all preference when it comes to that stuff. Some people are different. So next I'm just going to go ahead and slide the arm in here and then push the pin back through, and then we'll pretty much be ready to go, and we'll be able to check our window to make sure everything's lining up straight. Alright, so in between shots, Matt Smith actually broke the VFC hop-up unit, so A+ job, Matt, good stuff. So we had to switch to the retro arms unit, but all the theory stuff's the same. Actually ended up working out because you have to trim the buckings back for these anyway, so maybe it was meant to be. But now what you should get is if you look down the barrel, it's something you always want to check before you put it back in your gun. You just sort of want to put some hop on it, And what you should see when you look down the barrel is a nice flat bridge across the barrel window. It should be pretty much straight with, you don't want it leaning to the left or the right. If it does lean, chances are the bucking material seized up inside the hop-up unit and it's sort of bunching up toward the top, so you might want to take it out and like rework it a little bit. But it should be nice and straight, assuming your hop-up unit is straight. And then you're ready to go ahead and throw it back in your gun. Alright guys, so I hope you enjoyed the video. This has been a Pleb to Pro revisited for the flat hop. So once again, be sure to check out our other videos. There's a lot of good info in there. This was just sort of like a more in-depth as far as like the nub theory and how to cut everything, because I noticed there's kind of a void. There's a lot of guides online for that, but there weren't a whole lot of videos. So we just kind of shot this. We were bored today. Matt was bored. So way she goes. But as always, be sure to check us out on Facebook. Always subscribe and click here to see more. So thanks guys. Have a good one.